Good eve- good evening. I'm sorry about the delay. A little bit of internet issue, my fault. Um, my name is Jackie Kemp. I'm a writer and journalist, and I have a Substack at Jackie Kemp, Substack Letter from Scotland, if you want to check that out. So today we'll start with the Ukraine update, day 733. Russia launched 14 attack drones and a barrage of missiles at Ukraine over Sunday night and this morning, with a defense system destroying 9 drones as well as 3 guided missiles over the Kharkiv and Dnipropetrovsk region. Ukraine's Air Force said. Russia also launched 2 S-300 missiles from anti-aircraft missile systems and 1 air-to-surface K-31P missile, the Air Force said. European leaders are due to gather in Paris today to send Vladimir Putin a message of European resolve on Ukraine, to counter the Kremlin's narrative that Russia is bound to win. Emmanuel Macron, the French president, has invited his European counterparts to the Élysée Palace for a working meeting at short notice because of what his advisers say is an escalation in Russian aggression. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, UK Foreign Secretary David Cameron, and Dutch PM Mark Rutte, as well as leaders from Scandinavian and Baltic countries, are among those scheduled to attend. An attack on Sunday destroyed the train station, shops and homes in the town of Kostanivka, near the front line of Ukraine's 2-year-old war against Russia. Putin said a guided aerial bomb hit the station and 4 S-300 missiles followed in the pre-dawn hours. Vladimir Zelensky put a number on Ukraine soldier deaths for the first time, saying 31,000 troops have been killed since Russia's full-scale invasion. The Ukrainian president told a news conference in Kiev that he could not disclose the number of wounded because it would help Russian military planning. Zelensky said Russian forces would attempt another offensive in late May or summer. Zelensky said Ukraine has a clear plan for a new counter-offensive, but he could not disclose details. Ukraine's defense minister, Rustem Umerov, said his country was losing territory in a grinding war with Russia because 50% of weapons promised by Western partners failed to arrive on time. President Biden plans to meet with congressional leaders on Tuesday for discussions, including a stalled national security bill that provides assistance to Ukraine, Israel and Taiwan, according to the UN's president's aides. Russia's defense ministry said its forces had taken a more advantageous position near Avdiivka in Ukraine and repelled counterattacks. Andriy Yermak, Zelensky's chief of staff, said Russia could be invited to a peace summit if the Kremlin wants to genuinely end the war. Israel Gaza latest. Almost 30,000 Palestinians have been killed and 70,000 injured in Israeli strikes on Gaza since the 7th of October, the Gaza Health Ministry said. In the past 24 hours, 90 Palestinians were killed and 164 injured in Israeli strikes, according to the ministry. Human Rights Watch said that the Israeli government has failed to comply with an order by the UN's top court to provide urgently needed aid to desperate people in the Gaza Strip. Omar Shaker, the Israeli and Palestine director at Human Rights Watch, said, "The Israeli government has simply ignored the court's ruling and in some ways even intensified its oppression, including further blocking life-saving aid." Israel's military presented the War Cabinet with a plan for evacuating the population from areas of fighting in the Gaza Strip, and with the upcoming operational plan, a statement from Benjamin Netanyahu's office said. Israel has threatened to launch a full-blown attack on Rafah, the last city at Gaza's southern edge, despite international pleas, including from its main ally, Washington, for restraint. Netanyahu said there would be total victory in Gaza. UN Secretary Antonio Guterres has criticized the UN Security Council for failing to adequately respond to Israel's war in Gaza and Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, which he said had perhaps fatally undermined its authority. He also said that a full-scale Israeli assault on Rafah would have devastating consequences. Israeli officials headed on today to Qatar, where Hamas has its political offices, to work on terms of a Gaza truce and hostage release deal. The Israeli working delegation, made up of staff from the military and the Mossad spy agency, is tasked with creating an operational center for support negotiations. The Palestinian Authority, PA Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayyeh, told a press conference that he submitted his resignation to President Mahmoud Abbas. Shtayyeh, an academic economist who took office in 2019, said he was resigning to allow for the formation of a broad consensus among Palestinians about political arrangements following Israel's war in Gaza. Israel mounted airstrikes west of the Lebanese city of Baalbek today, killing at least 2 Hezbollah members, according to Reuters. The Israeli military said it was striking Hezbollah targets deep inside Lebanon, but provided no further details. Hezbollah said earlier today it had shot down an Israeli Hermes 450 drone over Lebanese territory using a surface-to-air missile, the second time it's announced a downing of this type of unmanned aerial vehicle. The SNP demand a investigation into Starmer's attempt to wreck a ceasefire vote. The SNP has called for a full, independent investigation into new revelations that prove Keir Starmer's Labour Party deliberately sought to wreck the SNP motion on an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and Israel. It follows a Channel 4 News interview with Chris Bryant MP on Sunday, in which the front-bench Labour Party MP admitted he was ordered to filibuster to block progress on the SNP's motion for immediate ceasefire and accepted we brought ourselves terribly into disrepute. Asked by Cathy he put up to filibuster the debate, or took it upon himself to do, Bryant admitted a bit of both, if I'm honest. I think the whole day was grubby, and we need a system that doesn't allow people to manipulate the rules to be able to get what they want, before laughing when asked if he would manipulate the rules to get his own way. It follows a series of damning revelations over the weekend, including that Keir Starmer used the time afforded by his party's filibuster attempts to barge his way in uninvited into an impromptu meeting with the Speaker shortly before he broke parliamentary rules, going against the advice of his clerks, to benefit the Labour Party leader. According to the Sunday Times, the Speaker kicked out clerks from the Reasons Room in order to speak to Starmer privately ahead of the vote, with Labour MPs gathered behind the Speaker's chair talking loudly of how Keir is going to fix the Speaker, and Labour Whip Chris Elmore telling MPs to use every procedural measure possible to delay. The Sunday Times reports Starmer emerged smiling following the meeting. Meanwhile, the Mail on Sunday reported that Sue Gray, Starmer's unelected Chief of Staff, was lurking near the Reasons Room when Starmer barged his way in uninvited. In another interview last week, Starmer refused to answer 3 times whether MPs had threatened the Speaker after senior Labour Party sources told Newsnet political editor Nick Watt that the Speaker was left in no doubt that Labour would bring him down after the general election unless he called Labour's Gaza Amendment. Commenting, Kirsty Blackman MP said, "These damning revelations show Keir Starmer pulled every trick in the Westminster book to wreck the SNP's vote on an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and Israel." Speaker blocks SNP's call for new Gaza immediate ceasefire vote. Stephen Flynn has accused the House of Commons Speaker of breaking his word after he blocked an emergency SNP debate on Gaza. It comes after the SNP tabled a fresh motion for an emergency debate so the UK Parliament could vote for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and Israel and mandate the UK government to take concrete steps to help make a ceasefire happen, including using its position on the UN Security Council to push for and vote for an immediate ceasefire, and immediately halting the transfer of military equipment and technology, including components, to Israel, and to suspend the issuing of new licenses in line with UN calls for an arms embargo. Last Thursday, the Speaker made an apology and public commitment in the Commons that the SNP could have an SO24 emergency debate after the Speaker undermined the SNP Opposition Day debate on Gaza by allowing a Labour Party amendment to be heard. The Speaker is alleged to have broken the House of Commons rules following a private meeting with Keir Starmer. Ahead of making the application for an emergency debate, the SNP wrote to all party leaders offering a meeting to discuss the contents of the SNP motion. So Keir Starmer was the only opposition leader who didn't respond. Nonetheless, the SNP included language from the Labour Party's amendment to maximise consensus. Commenting, SNP Westminster leader Stephen Flynn said, "Yet again, Westminster is failing the people of Gaza by blocking a vote on the urgent action the UK government must take to help make an immediate ceasefire happen. For months, the UK Parliament has blocked SNP calls for an immediate ceasefire, and now it's blocking a vote on the concrete actions the UK government must pursue to make an immediate ceasefire more likely. The UK is a key ally and defence trading partner of Israel and the United States, and a permanent member of the UN Security Council. It is not a powerless spectator, and Parliament has a moral duty to ensure the UK government is doing everything it can. If the debate in Westminster is to be anything other than meaningless, it's essential that warm words on an immediate ceasefire are backed up with concrete action, specific, practical, tangible measures. Economists warn that the UK public services will buckle under planned spending cuts. Economists have warned that the UK stretched public services will buckle under the weight of the spending cuts being planned for after the election, as Jeremy Hunt prepares for another round of tax cuts in next week's budget. Experts say the level of public spending penciled in for the next Parliament would mean cuts equivalent to those undertaken by David Cameron's government from 2010 to 2015. Some have warned the next government will not be able to implement them and will be forced either to raise taxes or borrow more to fund emergency spending. The stark warning came as the Chancellor considers cutting billions more from his public spending plans to pay for further reductions in either income tax or national insurance in next week's budget. Last week, the Resolution Foundation calculated such a move would mean taking a fifth out of budgets for certain departments across the Parliament, sparking concern among economists, trade unions, and even some Conservatives. Drew Henry MP said the SNP will strongly oppose both the Tory and Labour's plans to slash taxes for those with the broadest shoulders at the expense of hard-working families across Scotland who are currently suffering from the Westminster-made cost of living crisis. Mr Henry said the backing of these policies speak to the priorities of both Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer. Commenting, SNP economy spokesperson Drew Henry said, "Following a real terms cut after the last budget, which created a worst-case scenario for the Scottish Government, it is crucial Jeremy Hunt uses whatever headroom he has to prioritise investment in public services and infrastructure as opposed to tax cuts. The SNP will strongly oppose any plans to slash taxes which benefit those with the broadest shoulders, a policy now supported by Sir Keir Starmer's Labour Party, while hard-working families across these isles continue to suffer the consequence of a Westminster-made cost-of-living crisis. It really does speak to the priorities of both Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer that they'd rather give handouts to the rich than invest in public services." Humza Yousaf accuses the post-Brexit Labour Party of failing Scotland. At a pro-EU SNP campaign event in Glasgow today, held on the 5th anniversary of Labour's previous commitment to a second vote on Brexit, SNP leader Humza Yousaf said that on the 26th of February 2019, the then shadow Brexit Secretary Keir Starmer had stated unequivocally that Labour would back a second EU referendum. But 5 years on, this commitment is just one of a myriad of broken promises made by the Labour Party. Mr Yousaf was joined on the campaign trail by a group of young students at the pro-EU event, just days after Anna Sarwar's Labour Party hinted at support for backdoor tuition fees. Commenting, SNP leader Humza Yousaf said, "Scotland did not vote for Brexit, yet Westminster has taken a sledgehammer to our economy. It's hitting everything from our bills and our industries to our workforce and our students. However, as with so many issues, neither Labour nor the Tories can offer Scotland an alternative. Enough that a referendum on Brexit is just one of the many promises Keir Starmer has U-turned on, from £28 billion Green Energy Fund, capping bankers' bonuses, lifting the two-child benefit cap and abolishing tuition fees. You can't trust a word a Labour politician says." The pro-Brexit Labour Party has failed Scotland's young people. Worse still, senior Labour figures at Holyrood hinted last week at the introduction of backdoor tuition fees in Scotland. Let me be clear, the SNP will always fight to protect Scotland's values and ensure that education will always be free in Scotland. Brexit and Westminster aren't working for Scotland. The SNP is the only party at the upcoming election offering Scotland a route back into the European Union with the full powers of independence. UK government urged not to resurrect fees for employment tribunals. A coalition of 48 organisations, including the TUC, Citizens Advice, Joseph Rowntree Foundation, the Fawcett Society and Maternity Action, are urging the UK government to reconsider plans to introduce fees for employment tribunals amid fears it would encourage exploitation of workers. The organisation said bringing back the fees meant bad employers and be given the go-ahead to undercut good ones. The UK government was forced to ditch the previous fee regime in 2017 after the Supreme Court ruled it was preventing access to justice breaching UK and EU law. The number of cases brought by individuals dropped by almost 70% after the fees were first introduced in 2013 by Chris Grayling, the Lord Chancellor at the time. In a joint statement, the workers' rights group said the new fees, which start from £55 to bring a claim, risk pricing many people out of workplace justice. We believe reintroducing fees will deter many from lodging worthy claims and give a green light to bad employees to exploit the workers, they said. Bad employees are being given the go-ahead to undercut good ones, safe in the knowledge they are less likely to face claims in the employment tribunal. Employment rights are only real if they are enforced. While the initial fee can cover a claim on behalf of more than one person, an additional £55 appeal fee would be charged for each judgment, decision, direction or order being appealed against. Some employment tribunal rulings, such as the hard-fought case of employment status by Uber drivers, face multiple appeal hearings over many years, meaning that significant costs could be racked up for the claimants. The UK government announced that it was consulting on bringing back fees last month. Far right on rise in Portugal as election campaign begins. Portugal's 2-week general election campaign has officially begun, with centre-right and centre-left parties leading the polls, but the far-right populist is forecast to collect almost a fifth of the vote. Chega Enough, led by 41-year-old former football commentator André Ventura, could hold the balance of power if the polls prove accurate. His party scored 1.3% of votes in 2019's election, but jumped to 7.3% in 2022 and has since climbed to about 19%. Luis Montenegro, leader of the conservative Social Democrat Party, launched his campaign in the northern district of Bragança, saying he was confident of a great victory for the three-party alliance he has formed with two smaller rightist parties. Pedro Nuno Santos, leader of the incumbent Socialist Party, told shoppers at a market outside Porto that his party enjoyed a relationship of proximity and trust with voters and was focused on a victory that halts the right's advance. However, with the Socialists favourite to win the most votes, but combined right-wing parties expected to end up with more seats in Parliament, many observers' eyes were on Ventura, who has long said that he will not back a rightist coalition unless he is formally part of it. So far, the far right has failed to make much impact in Portugal, which in April celebrates half a century since its 1974 Carnation Revolution ended almost as many years of authoritarian rule. The early 10th March election, called after the surprise resignation of Socialist Prime Minister Antonio Costa, is being held in the shadow of multiple corruption scandals that have fueled voter disenchantment and favour the far right, analysts say. Costa's government collapsed last November amid a corruption investigation that led to a police search of his official residence and the environmental and infrastructure ministries, as well as the arrest of his chief of staff. He is not accused of any crime. Chega supports the death penalty, chemical castration for repeat rapists, and zero tolerance for illegal immigration. It has also said it wants Portugal to have more freedom from the EU to pursue some liberal economic ties. Far-right populists are in ruling coalitions in Italy and Finland and propping up another in Sweden. Austria's FPO is on track to win elections expected this autumn, while Germany's AfD and France's National Rally are at record polling highs. Man dies after setting himself on fire outside Israeli embassy in Washington. A man identified as a US Air Force member has died after setting himself on fire outside the Israeli embassy in Washington, authorities said. The man was taken to hospital in critical condition, but reports today confirmed that he had died from his injuries. Washington police said it responded to an incident on International Drive around 1 p.m. on Saturday to assist the Secret Service Fire and Emergency Services, said the man had serious burns. A video posted online showed a man in uniform shouting "Free Palestine" as he burned, while identifying himself as an active Air Force member. Reports say the man was on fire for about a minute before law enforcement put out the flames. The man whose name has not been released walked up to the embassy and began live streaming himself. He seemed to set the phone down and douse himself in fluid, and after setting it alight, saying he will no longer be complicit in genocide. The video was later removed from the internet. The Israeli embassy in Washington has been the focus of protests by pro-Palestinian demonstrators calling for a ceasefire to the Israeli military offensive in Gaza. Rule changes mean 20,000 more are eligible for the ScotGov Best Start foods for the first time. Changes to a key Scottish Government benefit will see an estimated 20,000 people able to access money to help with the cost of food shopping for the first time. Rule changes around eligibility for Best Start foods came into force today, extending eligibility by making it easier to qualify. Best Start foods, which were paid to more than 46,000 people in 2022-23, is money every 4 weeks to pay for healthy food from pregnancy until a child turns 3, delivered on a prepaid chip and PIN card which can be used in most stores and online. Before the changes, which come into force today, it was paid to people who received qualifying benefits as long as their incomes did not pass certain limits. These income thresholds have now been removed, in a move which means thousands more will be able to successfully apply for a card. Other rule changes have made it simpler for eligible young parents to receive the benefit. In 24-25, the Scottish Government are committing a record $6.3 billion for benefits expenditure, providing support to over 1.2 million people, which is $1.1 billion more than the UK Government gave to the Scottish Government for Social Security. Social Justice Secretary Shirley-Ann Somerville said, "This is an important day for the Scottish Government in terms of our mission to tackle poverty and protect people from harm. It will further benefit the whole economy when cards are used and the cash is spent." The ScotGov calls for end to uncertainty for private renters on low incomes. Scottish Government Housing Minister Paul McLennan has urged the UK Government to commit to linking local housing allowance rates to rents in future years to protect private renters on low incomes. Speaking ahead of the forthcoming UK budget, the Minister also said the Treasury should reverse the forecast 10% real terms cut to the Scottish Government's capital budget over the medium term. In order to plug this gap, which the Minister says has been further worsened by the bedroom tax and the benefit cap, the Scottish Government has allocated $84 million from their limited budget for discretionary housing payments in this financial year. This will rise to $90 million in 24-25 due to the continued difficult choices facing households. Mr McLennan called on the UK Government to end the uncertainty facing tenants and deliver a permanent solution to the local housing allowance shortfall by linking rates to rents for future years and committing to providing clarity with increased capital spending over future financial transaction allocations, which would mean more funding could be provided for affordable housing in 24-25. Mr McLennan said, "The damage done by the UK Government's 3-year local housing allowance freeze has been considerable. An estimated $819 million cut to the allowance across Great Britain has forced people to make difficult choices between paying their rent, feeding their family, or heating their homes. We are clear that this is the right thing to do to support households. However, the Scottish Government should not be forced to step in and divert money from our own housing and anti-poverty policies because the UK Government refuses to ensure there is an adequate safety net for people on the lowest incomes." Over 80,000 objections to Flamingo Land development on the shores of Loch Lomond. Over 80,000 people and organisations have now lodged objections against the controversial Flamingo Land proposal to build a mega resort on the banks of Loch Lomond, including the newly reformed Balloch and Haldane Community Council, representing local residents. The BHCC objection highlights the detrimental impact that the proposal would have on local traffic, services, green space and businesses. The application is also opposed by the National Trust for Scotland, the Woodland Trust and Ramblers Scotland. Critically, the Scottish Environmental Protection Agency has intervened to object to the current plans due to significant flooding risk. The overall number of objections makes it by far the most opposed planning proposal in Scottish history, beating the record previously held by the first failed Flamingo Land proposal for Loch Lomond. The Yorkshire-based developers were previously shamed into dropping their original plans in 2019 following a campaign led by Ross Greer and the Scottish Greens, which logged what was then a record 60,000 objections. While Mr Greer's campaign has successfully prevented Flamingo Land from trying to build on the ancient woodland of Drumkinnon Wood, their revised proposal would still see development on a huge scale, including over 100 self-catering lodges, 2 hotels, a water park, monorail, 370 parking spaces, and more. Mr Greer said, "Our record-setting 80,000 objections shows how strongly people across Scotland feel about this destructive and totally unacceptable proposal. Local opposition in particular is massive. Balloch residents could not be clearer in their rejection of Flamingo Land's plans. I'm delighted that the new Balloch and Haldane Community Council are now able to express the real anger felt by residents after a decade of this threat hanging over their community. Their objection really should be the final nail in the coffin for this application. Well, that's it for this evening. Before I go, I just want to remind you that at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. So to everyone who has donated and to everyone who's signed up to make a regular monthly payment, thank you very much. Our programmes will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. We're now just under 300 short of our £10,000 target. However, we really need to raise that last £300 so that we can pay our bills and focus on securing the future of independent broadcasting for Scotland by growing our subscriber base and regular funding. Thank you again. That was Jackie Kemp signing off. Thank you. Goodbye.